Hello everyone. Today, we're diving into the latest news about SpaceX and some incredibly interesting developments in the aerospace industry. What's going on with Starship? Is Ship 33 facing any issues? Booster 12 has entered Mega Bay. Could there be any danger? New Glenn is ready, but is it too late? Falcon 9 has just set a new record, and Rocket Lab is aiming for Mars. Do they have any chance to compete with SpaceX? Let's join the Space Now channel to explore the latest updates right now. Let's get started. First, we'll talk about Starship. The latest update is that Starship Flight Number 7 has finally happened. Ship 33 was brought to the launch pad on the 9th and quickly paired with Booster 14. This marks the first time a V2 ship has been paired with a booster, a significant milestone in SpaceX's development. However, after a series of additional tests, on the 10th, the roads were closed, and we saw fog coming from the fuel tank area. The frost line started to appear, slowly creeping up the spacecraft and booster as we witnessed the wet dress rehearsal. Unlike previous wet dress rehearsals, this time the spacecraft and booster were fully fueled, indicating a series of changes in the design of the fuel tanks, especially on the spacecraft. The frost line clearly shows the difference between Block 1 and Block 2 ships due to the larger fuel tank capacity. At that point, everything seemed fine, at least for the first hour, but things didn't go as planned. Some navigation warnings, required by SpaceX before proceeding with the flight, were canceled for the 13th. And as soon as the launch area reopened, we saw the spacecraft transport vehicle being brought back to the launch pad, and then SpaceX's chopsticks slowly closed to lift the spacecraft off the booster and place it back onto the transport stand. Fortunately, this didn't cause any major issues. This action was likely just in preparation for the flight termination system, which we believe was installed just before the spacecraft was brought to the launch pad. However, due to previous cancellations, the spacecraft might have been taken down for reasons beyond just preparing the flight termination system. While we're still waiting to find out exactly when Starship will launch, SpaceX has updated the launch date, pushing it back a few more days to January 15th. So, just a 2-day delay. However, the reason behind it remains a mystery. It could be due to the weather, as South Texas has been experiencing strong winds recently, and this situation could persist for a while. However, it's also possible that there is a technical issue with the spacecraft, as SpaceX has undoubtedly made thousands of changes to this new spacecraft design. Let's take a look at Ship 35, SpaceX's latest spacecraft, which has now begun the process of assembling its fuel tank. The forward dome has been moved into Mega Bay 2. From here, the spacecraft's construction pace will pick up quickly, just like the previous ship assemblies we've witnessed. We're probably no strangers to seeing 3 Block 2 ships in operation, or at least 2 in operation, and one that was previously operational until it floated in space. SpaceX's progress in building these spacecraft is truly impressive, and as they ramp up production, a new issue will arise: space. Unfortunately, this means some older vehicles will have to retire. As we witness the fuselage of Ship 35 being moved into Mega Bay 2, another vehicle is also being moved into the Mega Bay chamber. Back to the fate of Booster 12. This is the first booster captured by Mechazilla during Flight 5. Currently, they've decided to move it into Mega Bay. However, this booster is now just taking up space, and SpaceX is not a company that likes to let vehicles sit idle and occupy space. I really hope SpaceX will keep Booster 12, as it is a part of Starbase's history. It might have just been moved into Mega Bay for a checkup or to repair some damages, to see if the capture process caused any long-term harm. While Booster 12 still has a chance to retain its shape, Booster 14.1, or the test tank, hasn't been as lucky. It's also just taking up space in the rocket garden, and now that SpaceX has successfully captured a booster, this prototype capture is no longer needed. So it wouldn't be too surprising to see Booster 14.1 taken into high bay and cut into pieces. Unlike Booster 12, we don't feel much sorrow watching this test tank go because it has already fulfilled its mission and helped SpaceX learn a lot about capturing a booster. SpaceX is making rapid progress in every aspect, and even as the rocket launch activities are accelerating and we're getting closer to flight number 7, it's clear that other activities at Starbase aren't showing any signs of slowing down. However, there's another rocket launching, and it might even be the only one capable of surpassing Starship's flight. Of course, I'm talking about the launch and hopefully successful landing of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. We've been anticipating this event for many years, and finally, the moment has arrived. New Glenn is truly in a class of its own compared to most rockets today. Rockets that can compare to it include Falcon Heavy, SLS, and even Starship. With 7 BE-4 engines using methane fuel, producing over 3.7 million pounds of thrust, this rocket is on par with some of the most powerful rockets today. And all of this is achieved while New Glenn still has some reusability capabilities. However, there's a big question looming over the launch of this rocket and New Glenn itself. Is it too late? After all, SpaceX has been landing its Falcon 9 rockets using its propulsion system for almost a decade, and they've claimed this technology is outdated as they develop Starship. So can New Glenn really compete? This might be a shock to those who aren't fans of Blue Origin, but I hope you'll hear me out. I believe New Glenn has every chance of competing for many reasons. First, while it may still fall short in terms of technology compared to Starship, aside from that, New Glenn is currently the second most advanced rocket on this planet, which places it in a highly competitive position. And the truth is, Starship still hasn't operated as expected. Starship isn't expected to be fully operational and begin launching payloads beyond Starlink for at least another year, and it may take even longer before it can launch every type of payload. This gives New Glenn the opportunity to prove itself while Blue Origin continues refining their technology. Another plus is that many space missions have been contracted years in advance. Despite its enormous size, New Glenn's thrust and payload capacity are much lower due to its reusability. With a payload capacity of around 100,000 pounds to low Earth orbit, it is quite competitive with SpaceX's Falcon Heavy, which can lift about 110,000 pounds. While its low Earth orbit payload capacity is lower, New Glenn's payload bay is actually quite large, about the same size as Starship Block 2's payload bay, around 450 cubic meters. It's also worth noting that Starship's current payload bay is quite specialized. It can only deploy Starlink satellites, and there are no signs yet that SpaceX is developing hardware to deploy other types of payloads. Of course, this won't stay the same forever, but right now, Starship can only deploy Starlink payloads. This means New Glenn can launch larger, heavier payloads, which will attract more potential customers. So in this regard, New Glenn is leading. In the short term, it might even be better than Starship in another area, launching payloads into higher energy orbits. With its enormous weight, Starship can launch more payloads into low Earth orbit without the need for orbital refueling, which will incur significant costs in the near future. However, with its upper stage using highly efficient hydrogen, New Glenn can easily deploy payloads into these regions without worrying about reusability. This might sound strange, but stay with me. This could allow New Glenn to lower its prices compared to Starship for some missions. However, there is one final factor that, if executed correctly, could take New Glenn from struggling to keep up to possibly surpassing Starship in capability. That is if Blue Origin develops a reusable upper stage. This project was first revealed in 2021 when we discovered a test tank for what Blue Origin called the Jarvis project. After that, very little information was made public until 2023 when it reappeared in the form of a patent. The patent was for an actively cooled aerospike heat shield design, similar to the design that Stoke Space is planning. It was filed in December 2021. Around the same time, we started seeing actual activities related to the project. However, Since then, we haven't seen any information about a reusable upper stage for New Glenn. This doesn't mean that such an upper stage isn't being developed, as Blue Origin has a habit of keeping everything very secret until it's almost complete, if not already finished. If Blue Origin has been quietly working on this project over the years, it's possible that it has reached a fairly advanced stage. But one important thing to note, I've said this a few times in this video, is that this is Blue Origin's first orbital-class rocket. When New Glenn was first announced in 2016, we rocket enthusiasts were very excited, especially with the way Blue Origin named it. It all started with New Shepard, named after the first American to fly into space. And then there was New Glenn, named after the first American to orbit the Earth. Because of this, people began wondering if there would be a rocket named after America's most famous astronaut, Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. And sure enough, in that announcement, Jeff Bezos mentioned this rocket, saying it would be a future project. It's been nearly 9 years, and although New Glenn is just starting to be put into use, a lot of work has likely been done on the new Armstrong design. When Bezos mentioned this rocket, he said that New Glenn was designed to open up low Earth orbit for everyone. However, a much larger rocket will be needed for missions beyond low Earth orbit. Looking at the size and capabilities of New Glenn today, and the stark difference between it and New Shepard, a rocket with similar technological leaps could potentially match or even surpass future versions of Starship. Simply put, New Glenn is just a stepping stone, and although much of the development for Blue Origin's future vehicles is happening behind the scenes, it's likely still ongoing. If New Armstrong is also designed to be fully reusable, one day SpaceX may face a true competitor. Of course, this assumes that Blue Origin is currently developing this rocket. Even if they start building it now, it will be many years before it can catch up with Starship. Falcon 9 has just set a new record, this time with 25 flights and landings of a single Falcon 9 booster. This is truly impressive, especially considering SpaceX's original goal for Falcon 9 was just 10 flights per booster. Now, many boosters have exceeded 20 flights, and we're going to see many more boosters reach the 25 flight mark. An interesting point is that Blue Origin's goal for New Glenn is also 25 flights. However, because New Glenn was designed from the outset with reusability in mind, rather than retrofitting it like Falcon 9, it could surpass the 25 flight mark. Personally, I feel that what will limit the number of Falcon 9 flights is not mechanical issues, but rather its retirement once Starship is finally operational. Like New Glenn, many other reusable rockets will struggle to compete with Starship when they launch, but they still have a chance. For example, Rocket Lab with its Neutron rocket, which is currently in development. What's interesting is that Rocket Lab not only plans to develop a reusable rocket, but also has the ambition to set foot on Mars. Yes, Rocket Lab is aiming for Mars. This will be part of NASA's Mars Sample Return program, which has recently faced criticism over budget issues and scheduling problems. For this reason, NASA has opened the door for private companies to submit proposals, and Rocket Lab has put forward a plan to carry out a mission to return samples from Mars to Earth at a relatively low cost and in a reasonable time frame. Their approach is quite interesting, as they plan to send 3 vehicles to the Red Planet. The first of these will be a relay satellite. This will be the main vehicle through which the other spacecraft will communicate with Earth, as it will provide the necessary bandwidth for communication with the other vehicles. It will serve as a link between the vehicles. And this spacecraft will likely resemble the ones Rocket Lab has built for the Escapade missions, meaning they'll be quite proficient with most of the technology involved. The second vehicle in this plan will be the lander. This lander will be quite similar to other Mars landers, as it will re-enter the atmosphere protected by an outer shell before deploying and using propulsion to land softly. Sounds simple, right? By now, Rocket Lab may have succeeded in launching and hopefully landing with its Neutron rocket, which means they will have experience with powered landing. However, this could be the most difficult part of the mission. Once on Mars, the Perseverance rover will drive to the lander to transfer samples directly into the vehicle that will fly back before it launches off the Martian surface and returns to orbit. From there, this vehicle will rendezvous with the spacecraft that will return to Earth, the third and final vehicle launched to Mars. This spacecraft is entirely designed to bring the samples from Mars orbit back to Earth. It does this by placing the samples into a return capsule before starting its journey back to Earth. Rocket Lab's proposal has several interesting elements. Overall, however, its architecture seems quite similar to NASA's plans for Mars sample return. The main differences are Rocket Lab's involvement, the addition of a relay satellite, and the breaking up of the mission into multiple launches. We'll have to see how NASA decides to proceed. Either way, Rocket Lab is not the only company betting on this contract. With companies like SpaceX also targeting it, we might witness a scenario similar to what we saw with the HLS program. We'll definitely be following any updates on this. Who knows, maybe SpaceX will propose landing Starship with an astronaut to collect samples. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Space Now channel for the latest updates from us.